Welcome to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where in every episode we explore what is research culture and what should it be. You'll hear thoughts and opinions from a range of contributors to help you change research culture into what you want it to be.
Hello, and welcome to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. For those that don't know me, my name's Nick Sheppard. I'm Open Research Advisor here at the University of Leeds. I'm very excited today to be joined by three colleagues. So this is a bit unusual for me. I'm used to speaking to colleagues one-on-one. So we've got three colleagues joining me today. So I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. We've got Dr. Chris Hassall, Hira and Beth Soanes. So I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get to talking about Wikimedia. So in the last episode, we talked to a Wikimedian in residence. That was Martin Poulter. And today we're talking to these colleagues with whom I've been working on a pilot project around Wikimedia. So I'll let them introduce themselves and we'll take it from there. So over to you, Chris.
Hi, my name is Chris Hassall. I'm Associate Professor of Animal Biology here at the University of Leeds, and I have a particular interest in teaching and teaching technology. So that's my interest in this Wikimedia project.
Great, thank you. And Hira?
Hi, I'm Hira Khan. I'm a fourth year PhD student in structural biology. I decided to do this project because I'm really interested in outreach and I'm really interested in ethical research practices. So I thought Wikipedia was a great way to do that. Beth?
Thank you. And Beth?
I'm Beth. I'm a third year PhD student in the School of Biology working on temperature response in plants. I decided to get involved with this project because I believe quite strongly in the benefit of open science and good science communication. And I think Wikimedia has a real potential to improve equality, diversity, and inclusion in science.
Okay, great, thanks. So for a bit of context, I mean, I suppose perhaps a bit too late to apologise to you, Beth and Hira, of the rush we placed on you and Chris as well. So it was all a little bit rushed, wasn't it, in terms of the deadlines we were trying to work to with this project last year. But what we were trying to do was to work with Chris and with PGRs in the Faculty of Biological Sciences on this pilot project to Wikimedia. So we'll talk a bit, what you've done as we go. But I suppose the first question I might ask you is, prior to this project, had you much experience of actually editing Wikipedia yourselves?
Me, definitely not. I didn't even know I was allowed to edit Wikipedia, to be honest. And it's not really something I took an interest in because I think the narrative that usually surrounds Wikipedia is that it's an unreliable source. So therefore, if you want to go down peer-reviewed, high-quality research, I just didn't even think Wikipedia or any of the Wiki sisters is an option until I started doing this project, and I realized it's all a lie and it is reliable, and we do have rights to contribute.
And Beth, had you much experience of editing Wikipedia?
Not really. I'd done some work in sort of wikithons in the past when I was an undergrad. It was sort of an initiative I'd heard about through Jess Wade, who is a very prominent science communicator and involved in EDI and STEM. And this was sort of a drive to generate and improve wiki pages for female scientists, which I took part in and I really enjoyed, but I didn't really think about wiki beyond that. And in hindsight, I did this rather passively without thinking about the sort of wider ramifications and opportunities that Wikipedia and Wikimedia generally presented, and I'm glad this is no longer the case.
What about you, Chris? Had you edited Wikipedia in the past? Or?
In very, very specific ways. So I'm a little bit more positive about Wikipedia and Wikimedia than Hira is. I'm
positive now.
Hira was, sorry. So I've always seen it as a really useful way to introduce yourself to a topic, and more importantly, to find the references that are included right at the bottom of each article. And I'm open in saying to my undergraduate students that if you can use it as just an information aggregator in that way, then it serves a fantastic purpose. Some scientific articles are absolutely superb, but you do have to be a little bit careful about who's been writing. I had edited very, very lightly in the past, mostly to help friends out. when personal project pages were up and could have benefited from a bit more content.
Mm-hmm. And we've already alluded, I think, to some of the other Wikimedia projects beyond Wikipedia, because everybody, I think, knows about Wikipedia. But were you aware of the other platforms here at first, perhaps Wikimedia Commons and Wikidata?
Definitely not. I didn't even know. Honestly, there's so much. There's Wiki Voyage as well, and then there's also Wiktionary as well. There's a whole world out there I just wasn't aware of. But yeah.
And Beth, did you have any awareness of those?
No, not at all.
No, not at all. And as I say, I mean, I'm a bit more familiar now with Wikimedia Commons and Wikidata, but there's a load of other ones that I'm still not that familiar with. Did you have much awareness of those platforms, Chris?
Mostly Wikimedia. There's been this big push, right and rightly so, for academics to stop just stealing images from Google for the lectures and being much more aware of copyright infringement and use of Creative Commons resources. So Wikimedia Commons is a big source of mostly images, illustrative images and photographs for me to illustrate my scientific content in my lectures.
And that was one of the things, wasn't it, that we focused on in the project here? I mean, maybe we can talk about that as we go. I'll hand over to you now, Christo, and perhaps you had a question to put to Hira and Beth.
Yeah, I'm interested in not just thinking about the content that you've provided through your editing of Wikimedia, but thinking about the more general skills that you might have developed or acquired, if any, during the project. So maybe Hira first.
Yeah, so I think, so in terms of the skills, I think communication is a really, really big one. I think, I don't know about you, Beth, but for me, there's no real focus on the skills in communication, especially communication towards community, communicating with people from who do not come from the same scientific background. So you can talk in simple languages, but you're still articulating something that is quite complex science. And I think it's really important part of research to understand why your science is relevant. And one of the ways that you can actually navigate through this and measure this is to see the impact and the interest that you get from the community. But if you don't have the skills to be able to communicate that, then you end up creating a disjoint between what we're actually conducting in research and what the community is aware of. And I think COVID-19 and vaccination is the most recent and the most prominent example that I can give. So yeah, I think I've definitely learned the importance and how to communicate scientific, complex science in a very simple terms. And then the other one is maybe a little bit irrelevant, but time management. I think this project, this pilot project took a little bit more time than I anticipated, obviously not a problem, but I think that with my other extracurricular activities, I think I was able to manage my experiments and this project and my other projects a lot better. So being able to be more efficient with my timings and stuff. So yeah.
Great, thanks. And Beth?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like expanding a little bit on what Hira said, I thought it provided a great opportunity to combat science miscommunication, and developing those skills is so important. The research that I do is involved in, how crops respond to the climate. And so with all of the kind of climate denial going on, being able to communicate that research in a really accessible way is so important. So I think I sort of developed skills that I'd maybe already scratched the surface of through this project. I found that through kind of perusing articles that might need expansion or rejigging, improve my comprehension and synthesis. So it's directly useful to my research, and also directly useful to my role as a scientific communicator. I found that the easiest way to consolidate maybe complicated scientific concepts was through diagrams and schematics, which I'd had some hand at developing for research articles and for my thesis, but not really for kind of a public-facing medium. So I found it interesting to see how my approach to generating those figures changed as I went through the project. I find now that when friends and family ask me what I'm doing, I can explain it in a way that they actually understand, which wasn't true before this project. And I can see that while that's nice in a kind of personal aspect, it's also so important going forward, because the kind of research that we're doing in one way or another is directly relevant to the public good. And if we misrepresent that research, it has quite severe ramifications down the line. So yeah, definitely science communication. I also found that I sort of developed a little bit some coding skills, and just sort of better at searching through the available literature to find a wider group of researchers to represent in articles that I developed, which wasn't really something I thought about before, shamefully, but now I do, and I think that's really important.
Good. Yeah, it's interesting that you've both focused on the science communication angle. Wikipedia is quite a distinctive form of science communication. It's easy for academics to talk about the literature that they're producing in, say, a popular media article, or on a podcast or on a radio show, where we're not necessarily subject to the same kinds of editorial rigor and vigor that Wikipedia can impose. How did you find that process of communicating science, but with the editorial community of Wikipedia always looking over your shoulder?
I think for me, it's so basically when I initially tried to edit my structural biology page, the images, I added microscope images from, because the current page, the microscope images were quite outdated, and it wasn't really encapsulating the magnificence of that microscope, the Titan Quartz microscope that we've got at the moment. So I basically tried to put University of Leeds on the map and add the pictures, but I was struggling with the captions that is associated with the images. And then when I added it in, somebody came in the next day and took my pictures out. So I think that really set the scene of how, like you said, it is like rigorous, and it is reliable, and people do check it, and the pages are constantly edited, which I thought was, I wasn't offended at all. I thought, wow, this is great, and this is something where I'm just like, I'm being held accountable, basically, which is really good.
Yeah, I was also impressed by the rigor of the Wikipedia community. I'm still in the process of uploading and publishing edits, and I found that when I was, like I said, looking for articles that I felt maybe were missing something or not communicating a technical aspect very well, I would sort of comment this in the edit section, and I would quite often get replies being like disagreeing or agreeing or whatever it was. I feel like it was a bit of a learning curve finding the best way to successfully edit an article. And I think I'm still kind of going through that process now as I continue to edit articles, because I think this is something I'm going to continue to do throughout my scientific career. I think it's so important. I think that will get a little bit easier with time, because whilst you're also trying to communicate that scientific concept well, you're also trying to communicate to the community why you think it needs to be changed. Yeah, not sure if that answered the question.
Yeah, no, definitely did.
I think something else, though, something that I really appreciated was how beneficial and how universal it is to convey science or convey any kind of knowledge through diagrams and imagery, and how important visuals are. And I think I just did not realize this before I started this project. And also, like, for instance, one of the images that we're creating a flow diagram of how you get from the sample all the way down to a protein structure. And you can just edit the labels, and then you can add Japanese words, equivalent Japanese words to it. But it doesn't require as much work, and it's just it makes it really accessible all over the world. And this is something that I thought was, it's a really great way to do that.
Yeah, I think it was using the ability to use diagrams and the different language features is one of the best ways to make information accessible. And
I just wanted to comment on that, because it's an area that I'm really interested in my role in the library, and the fact that, we're dealing with open access research papers where they're openly licensed and they've got all sorts of images within them that are embedded within the papers. And for a long time, I've been trying to encourage colleagues to actually upload those to Wikimedia Commons under that open license, when they can be discovered, as you found, Chris, to actually find them online, but also be used to illustrate Wikipedia articles. So that was one of the things that I was really excited to work with you on, Hira, in that particular example where you had the experience and the knowledge and the specialism to actually look at an image and work with colleagues at the university to develop that image and then upload that to Wikimedia Commons. Yeah, so I think that's a really, really positive outcome of the project. Sorry, Chris, back to you.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that we're discussing this unbundling of academic papers and taking the assets out for sharing more widely. Academics always think about the PDF as being the unit of sharing and the unit of interest, but of course, yeah, huge amounts of effort goes into producing sometimes very complex diagrams. Scientific illustration isn't taught to our undergraduate students anymore, but it's hugely important as we've discussed. So yes, that's an interesting perspective on asset reuse and open data sharing. It's interesting. Maybe I can go on to the next area that I wanted to ask you two about, though, which is you've highlighted two areas that you've edited on Wikipedia: the cryo-electron microscope work, and then this idea about climate change and the work that you do, Beth. I was wondering, are there any areas of biology that you think need a little bit of extra attention on Wikipedia? Is there anything you've come across during your reading?
Should I go?
Yeah, Beth first, sure.
I actually think a lot of fundamental science is maybe not badly represented, but underrepresented on Wiki. I think when readers might be searching scientific ideas that are kind of considerable in the public zeitgeist, like climate change, genetic modification, the kind of technologies that scientists are using now that Hira's talking about, they will inevitably come across more in-depth technical scientific terms. And then to understand that wider issue, I think it wouldn't be unusual for them to want to deep dive a little bit and understand these things better. And when I was doing that, I felt like the information dropped significantly in accessibility. So for example, I was looking at genetic modification articles and food security articles and coming across ideas like gene splicing and things like that. And this is where most of my edits were then kind of involved in, because I found these articles lacked both depth. They often sort of skimmed these technical molecular processes and would be very hard to untangle if you weren't familiar with the topic. So it was sort of rejigging those articles, improving the figures, making that information flow in a sensible, logical way was something that I saw as really important. Even I, as someone who does work on splicing, reading that article, I couldn't really understand what it was trying to tell me. And as well as this, it was something I alluded to earlier. I think Wikipedia can be used to raise the platform of different prominent people in science, and the lack of representation of minority profiles on Wiki, of female biologists, of different ethnic minorities is really important. And the third thing, I think Wiki has a huge potential to drive open research and open science through Wikidata. And having that data available to the public, it's becoming more and more common. There are all sorts of different platforms that do this now, but the difference of Wikipedia is it's so public facing. And I think that could encourage cross collaboration from people in entirely different fields doing different types of research that could provide a wider perspective. So one thing that comes to mind is if you have a genome-wide association study, which is used to identify genetic variants, for instance, crop species over a global distribution responding to heat, something like that. If that could be analysed from the perspective of ecologists, geologists, mathematicians, people with different areas of expertise that's related to that problem, it could greatly expand the findings from that data. And this aspect of Wikidata was something I was completely unfamiliar with before I started working on the project, and I think it's really exciting.
It's really interesting that you pick up on the complexity of Wikipedia. That's definitely been my feeling as well. I teach some graduate level statistics courses. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm looking for a lay summary of what a particular statistical test does, how it works, and I go to the Wikipedia article and it's far beyond my understanding, because they go almost immediately into very technical details. It's a strange juxtaposition to have Wikipedia held up as this way to democratize knowledge, but also have the knowledge there sometimes so inaccessible. An interesting observation.
I mean, that's really interesting listening to you speak as scientists, in that context. And you've talked about the learning curve of engaging with the community, and it's experiences I've also had as well. And, that is a big part of it, isn't it? Actually learning to liaise with the community. And conflicts of interest, if you, especially when you associate with a university, you have to be careful around conflicts of interest, etc. But yeah, I suppose hearing you describe how the language is overly technical, I suppose that depends who's editing it. If it is someone who is an expert or not, and maybe they're getting their information from elsewhere, and actually it's a skill, isn't it, being able to present that information in an accessible way, as Beth said. So yeah, it's fascinating. Just a comment really, but I'll let you carry on.
Hira, did you have any thoughts about gaps?
I guess to touch on what you guys said, I think firstly, I think the page that Beth was talking about, the splicing DNA variants or something like that, basically it's very strange when you look at the figure legends and you look at generally over the writing, it kind of on the surface level, it makes sense. It's like a bunch of words put together, a bunch of smart words put together, and it's like, oh, this is like, it makes sense. But then actually, when you delve deeply and you really try and think about what is written, you're like, actually, the figure legend might make sense, but it doesn't match the picture. And I think this is why scientists like us, or people from experts within that field, should have a sense of responsibility in actually contributing to open access platforms like this, because that will omit any kind of misunderstandings and omit any kind of misinformation. The other thing is an issue that I was having was a diagram that I might come across, let's say, in terms of how an electron microscope works, or even just the workflow on how you get a protein structure. There were really good images on certain journals, and those journals had copyright infringement. So we could not use those images for Wikipedia or open access. And it's almost like there's a certain gatekeeping. There's a gatekeeping of information, there's a gatekeeping of knowledge. And I'm doing another project outside of Wikipedia where we're trying to understand a researcher's perspective within the university on what they think about good research assessment practices and how we can improve them. And a lot of people have mentioned that there is difficulty for people who are quite high up in the hierarchy, people who are professors and people who are very well established in their career, to try and get them to change their processes and get them to change the manner and the way that they do research, because it's worked for them for the last 20-30 years. So I think if, young researchers like us, or even like you, Chris, where we actually push this agenda on we're responsible for open access research, we're not keeping our information, our knowledge, and it will push journals like the ones I'm finding difficult with, or have difficulty with, to get them to also not have copyright infringement as well. So I think that's one part. The second thing is, I think I've realized that even though, let's say, my structural biology pages, it might have an overarching theme where it makes sense or there is adequate knowledge. However, as you delve deeper in terms of, what the findings of structural biology is and how much it has helped science, for instance, virus studies, and how much we have learned about particular diseases just through structural biology, those pages are missing. And I think the knowledge that we're finding and publishing is not, the wiki pages aren't evolving as fast, so we're missing a whole gap of like newfound research and newfound techniques. So I think that is something that we can potentially work on, where we're matching the publications that are coming out and matching the pages that are being created. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that keeping the public-facing science relevant and up to date with the actual research is something that's really important.
Yeah.
If you wait too long, then things have moved beyond what the public are seeing if you don't keep that sort of in sync. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way.
I think I just something that I realize is that just from my own community and my own family is that they don't realize the importance of what I'm doing. They just are just doing a PhD, and they don't realize like this is actually, they think that unless it has direct medical impact, it's irrelevant, but it's not really like that. You know, it might have impact in 20, 30 years time, and there's a chain of events that happens. And I think being able to communicate that and communicate why these research is important. I think, you know, Wikipedia is a great platform to do that.
Yeah, no, it's really, as I say, just one of the things we wanted to achieve through this pilot project, and we're running it again, of course, with Chris. Can you hear me okay? Because I've got I'm being warned that my internet connection's unstable.
I can hear you fine.
So yeah, one of the things we wanted to achieve through this was, you know, as I often say, in my role within the library, as a central service, I'm a layperson, and I, as a hobbyist, you know, I edit Wikipedia a little myself. I might cite papers, interesting papers that I come across on all sorts of subjects, because in my central role I come across that. But obviously, I'm not an expert. I don't know my you know, electron microscopy from my gene splicing, from my quantum physics, you know, and that's what we need, the experts like you and current experts to actually contribute to Wikipedia. And the way it might sound a bit grandiose, but I think similar to what Hira said before, that, you know, I do feel really that the academy, that universities have a responsibility to ensure that Wikipedia as an outwardly facing platform is as accurate as it can be. And, you know, it's not perfect, obviously. It's as Martin said, it's the starting point. You know, it's a teaching opportunity as well, but there's huge potential to actually get that information out to the public. My next question, really, I think you've sort of already discussed a little bit, Beth. I mean, maybe I'll put the same question to you here first. Is the role of Wikimedia and Wikipedia in terms of promoting diversity in STEM? I mean, again, something I talk about with Martin quite a bit in the podcast I recorded with him, and the one that always sticks in my mind is, you know, there's more articles about the Netherlands than the whole continent of Africa, because it reflects the people that are editing it. You know, they are by and large, you know, perhaps white middle class people from the global north, etc. And we tried to do a little bit of work around that. So we worked with Lucas, which is the Leeds University Centre for African Studies, for an editathon where we were trying to cite Black and African scholars on Wikipedia, for example. And again, that's another case where they have the expertise that I would lack in actually knowing which scholars to cite, etc. I don't know if you have any further thoughts on that, Hira, before coming to you, Beth, as you say you've already referred to that.
Yeah, so I think I did a little bit of research, and there were a few pages about, you know, the underrepresentation of people of color within its editor base. And one of the issues that they were saying they were having was that Black history was majorly being left out, as articles are written by predominantly white males. And I think there was a study that showed that in 2018, 90% reported genders that contribute towards Wikipedia were white males. And I think if it's encouraged and if it's, you know, incentivized that minorities should contribute, hold on, sorry, 1 second. They should contribute, and it kind of gives a voice to people that are underrepresented, and it shows that, you know, their opinions matter, is that, you know, that they have a platform for them to express themselves, express their research, and I think that kind of will shift in the way that maybe a certain demographic is contributing towards Wikipedia and open access research, and therefore hopefully that can actually relay that onto actually the scientific community, and, you know, the women that get promoted, or people who, for instance, when they're looking at recruitment, they don't really focus on outreach, and they look a lot they look for publications and they look at research metrics like impact factors and all that stuff. So I think if someone was to speak about their contributions towards open access research and, you know, the way that they're being cited or the way that they contribute to editing Wikipedia or other encyclopedia channels, I think it's a really good incentive for those minorities. Beth?
Yeah. Further thoughts from you, Beth? You'd already talked about Jess Wade. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to. I mean, I'm aware of Jess Wade as well, and just to say as well, I can add links, etc., in the show notes on the podcast, so I can link to some of the work that she's done. But in that context, I suppose I don't know if you're aware, Beth, of just something I saw on Twitter with Jess Wade in particular, because as you say, I think she writes an article a day, I think Martin's saying, about a woman, a new female scientist on Wikipedia. But she has quite a lot of trolls, for want of a better word, that will actually immediately revert those, or they'll say they're not notable, and then you've got this systemic issue where actually female scientists aren't as well written about in the media, so there's not the actual content to cite the primary research to actually make them notable in terms of Wikipedia's guidelines. There was a really famous example, actually, I don't remember the name, I should do, but of a female scientist that was taken, her profile, a new profile was taken down, her page was taken down off Wikipedia for not being notable, and the next week or so she was awarded the Nobel Prize, that kind of thing. So I think that's really, really interesting. And again, I'll try and find details for that to link in the show notes. But do you have anything further to add on what you've said already, Beth?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of cyclical systemic issue. And I think the kind of direct role of creating articles for prominent women and ethnic minorities in STEM and referencing articles with their work is really important. But as you say, there's kind of an uphill battle there with kind of direct resilience from particular groups in the community. And I think whilst continuing to, fight that and use it to upload this information is really important, that's also putting kind of an undue pressure and undue work on a group of people that already have it harder in academia and in research. So I think the kind of other way that maybe we haven't touched on that Wikimedia and Wikipedia can promote diversity in STEM is to maybe reduce that gap in the first place in the longer term, just by improving accessibility to science. Sort of scientific literacy is really dictated by exposure at a young age. And if you've got like parents or family members or live in an affluent area, you're more likely to be exposed to scientific ideas and the idea of jobs in science, and then, pursue that. And that kind of pipeline exists for certain groups of people more than it does for others. And so if we can have accessible, exciting, well-written, interesting scientific information available on the internet, that's going to improve scientific literacy in these groups of people that otherwise have less exposure. I think, and then that will feed in the future to there being less of a gap in who's doing science, and generally improve everybody's sort of scientific literacy, reduce the likelihood for them to be trolling Jess Wade on Twitter, that kind of thing. So I think just improving the accessibility of scientific information itself is promoting diversity in STEM.
Yeah, and I mean the proportion of biographies about female scientists or prominent female people in general has gone up, I think, partly through the work of a project called Women in Red. I don't know if it was actually the very first editathon I went to at the University of Edinburgh with the Wikimedian in residence there, Ewan McAndrew. And the Women in Red refers to the red link, because if a subject doesn't exist in Wikipedia, the link is red until it's created. So Women in Red it refers to that. And he talks a lot about this circular aspect, the fact that we need to encourage primary writing in the media, etc., because that's what you need to actually cite for Wikipedia. So yeah, it's but it is changing, but again, very slowly. I think we're about maybe 80-90% of biographies, something like that now.
I think there was a study, I think there was basically kind of that ties in with this. There was a study where they looked at demographics of students that enter university with the same grades. So they get the same A-level grades, but then so the idea is that they should have the same capacity to learn, and they should end with the same grades, so the first class degree or 2-1 or whatever. And then they found that actually the minorities, especially the Black minorities, are doing marginally less better than the white counterparts that come in with the same grades. And I think they said that one of the contributions towards this is that they don't have anyone to emulate. So the demographic of people who are professors and people who are PI do not represent the demographic of students that are entering the university. So, and I think it completely demotivates that student because they don't have anyone that they can look up to. And I think Wikipedia is a great way for that, where Beth said, you know, if you have where a more diverse population that are contributing towards it, then it's like you actually have someone to emulate. You have these pages of women from these particular backgrounds that are doing well, these scientists that are doing well, and if they might not be in the university directly with you, but they are out there. And I think that kind of reinstills motivation and enthusiasm for like you can get somewhere.
Yeah, giving a platform to role models. Yeah.
Okay, I'm a little bit conscious of time, so I'll hand on to you, Chris, for what's your final question that would preceded, I think?
Yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot of this, and in far greater detail than I'd anticipated, which is fantastic. Thinking about the role of Wikipedia in education more generally. I mean, my area of interest in particular is thinking about undergraduate and postgraduate students at universities, but you've already highlighted the fact that it plays a potentially really important role in almost the formative experience of science from primary school all the way through to the end of university and then beyond when they become members of the general public. But I wonder if maybe you could pick up on what you think might be sort of the most important way in which Wikipedia can help that transition from, I guess, scientific naivety into becoming a scientifically informed person, taking into account some of these ideas around diversity of the voices that they're hearing.
I think something that I found in the general consensus when I'm doing when I'm teaching undergraduates and I have master students with me, is that there's a complete lack of confidence in their knowledge. And I think that confidence really, it really impacts in terms of their passion for science. And I think if they feel incentivized to contribute to open access research and open access information like Wikipedia, I think it really instills that confidence in them. And I think that, and then it shows them that their knowledge is not undermined, first of all, and it instills a sense of responsibility of collegiality and collaboration, and a feeling of sense of community quite early on in the careers. And as I said before, that from the research that I did before in terms of research assessment practices, is that people who are quite high in their career, quite established in their careers, they're difficult to change in the way that the processes, the way that they do things. But I think if you instill this approach quite early on into their careers, then you're more likely to see change, I guess.
That's really interesting. So I mean, what we would call that is active learning. That you're learning by doing, learning by generating rather than passively receiving information. And I really like the idea of that, building the confidence of early career researchers and students. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. Beth?
Yeah, I second that. I think the best way to learn something and understand it well is to be able to teach it, explain it to somebody else. And you could see Wikipedia projects for undergraduates and postgraduates being a sort of teaching exercise, like produce materials for people who don't study this yet or who don't understand this yet. Those basic skills and literature synthesis, referencing, producing figures, maybe even coding to find specific references, are all things that are going to be directly relevant to their studies, to their research, that they could develop through Wikimedia. And as Hira said, improve their confidence in their own abilities and in looking in the long term, multimedia experience, expanding their CV, all of this is good stuff. I think it's a really untapped tool that would be really, really beneficial to students.
And I think the other thing is that they need to realize they don't need to attain perfection.
Yeah.
You know, I think so much research is about perfection and, you know, having perfect data, perfect reports. And I think it's just like, all you just have to do is just try, and all you have to do is just contribute. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think it's, you know, it's a great way to do that.
Maybe being faced with the sort of editor community would be a good opportunity to face failure up front and learn that it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, and of course, when they produce something on Wikipedia or Wikimedia, they have that to show out to the outside world rather than
it's an actual output.
It's what we'd call something of an authentic assessment rather than just a file that will sit on a server somewhere in the university, only to be read by one marker. So yeah, really, really useful contribution to society too.
Which is credited as well. I think that's something that people are perhaps totally aware of. If you've got your account and you set up a Wikipedia account, every edit that you ever make is tracked. You know, it's not like it's the global commons and you're contributing for the greater good, but you can see, and I think that's something that people are unaware of, perhaps, that you can identify your individual contributions quite easily. Okay, well, I'm a little conscious of time, as I say. I mean, I said at the beginning that speaking to my colleagues with whom I've been doing these podcasts, mine always seem to be rather longer than theirs, which is fine. You know, it's interesting. But I suppose, and I already know the answer to this, but my sort of final question to you, as I've written it down, as I say, you've already answered this, I think, but, you know, how has your view and opinion of Wikipedia or Wikimedia changed as a result of the project? As I say, you've already answered that, but any sort of final words on that? Definitely.
I don't think I felt too deeply about Wikipedia before this project. I now see it as a public good, a way to improve scientific literacy, accessibility, renewed passion in my own subjects, improve public trust and expertise, distribute tools to the layperson to different fields, and inform people's opinions about scientific issues. I think it's massively changed my opinion of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Hira?
Yeah, and I just think I think Wikipedia is probably a driving force where it might break the culture of gatekeeping research and gatekeeping knowledge. And I think if people contribute towards, especially scientists contribute towards more, then it will push journals and other people who don't really prioritize this to actually start prioritizing this. And I'm just surprised why people are not more aware of Wikipedia and its sister counterparts. I just think, you know, like I don't know why there's such a massive misconception. I just don't know where it comes from, but yeah.
Well, I mean, just on that, is it maybe a barrier of the technology? I mean, it's something I talk about with Martin. It's not that easy to use, is it? I mean, we haven't really touched on that. I think maybe,
yeah,
is it fair to say that you both struggled a little bit? I certainly have in actually getting to grips with the tools themselves, because it is, as Martin says, a 90s technology. You know, it's an old technology. It's not necessarily that user-friendly.
Yeah, it's not very streamlined in terms of how to use it. And I know I did ask you for help quite a bit because I was struggling with it. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons why. It makes sense. Okay, great. I mean, perhaps just finish with the same question to you, Chris. I mean, as you obviously you're aware of Wikipedia and Wikipedia, etc. previously, has it altered your view at all, or just reinforced what you thought already? I
think it mostly reinforced the value that I perceive in it. I mean, so I went out and tried to edit some Dragonfly articles, and which is what I did my doctoral research on, and found them to be almost complete. I couldn't really, I was messing around at the edges of the articles rather than generating anything new. In that sense, it's a bit frustrating for somebody who likes science communication, because all the easy work's been done, and then you're on to the really technical details, you know, really building out, fleshing out in quite specific and research-led ways. It's always been something that's on my to-do list, to generate more student education opportunities with Wikipedia. There's so many researchers out there, as we've talked about, who are underrepresented. But from my personal discipline, biodiversity research, there's so many species out there that need documentation as well. In an extinction crisis, I think there's a real value for Wikipedia to come to the battle and raise the profile of all those species that we're losing as well. There's great photos, there's great information, all these fascinating facts about these animals, plants, and others that I think could be a really exciting opportunity for students to get stuck in as well.
Okay, well, sorry, Beth.
No, I was just agreeing.
Well, and and perhaps on that note, we'll perhaps draw it to a close. And maybe we'll perhaps reconvene next year and see, how many of those species have been added, Chris, to Wikipedia or Wikidata or wherever in the meantime. So
no pressure.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for listening. And we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss out on our brand new episodes. And if you're enjoying the discussions, give us some love by dropping a 5-star rating and written review, as it helps other research culturists find us. And please share with a friend and show them how to subscribe. Email us at academicdev@leeds.ac.uk. Thanks for listening, and here's to you and your research culture.